Hello, good evening, and welcome to Ghana Connect. Tonight, the attacks against foreigners, most fellow Africans in South Africa. Why does it keep happening?
You look at the cedi is coming down. You look at the rand is coming down. It's the economy. It's the economy in the continent. It's, our economies will fluctuate, but at this point in time, petrol is rising, the food prices are rising in South Africa. So people are feeling the pinch.
Is it a symptom of a miserable continent where most of its countries have simply failed to provide acceptable living conditions for its citizens? We connect Ghana, Africa, and beyond to explore. We connect after the break.
So everyone says I'm a Kosia filler, but it's not like I'm nosy or go out to find out the latest filler. It's just that I get 50 megabytes of data free after paying for only the first minute of every call. And so I just keep discovering stuff minute after minute. That's how come I was minding my business, scrolling through my timeline, and I found out Coco has a new baby. Oh, and last week, I learned Ken won the lottery. You see, Ken is my brother's friend. So hello, look who's about to roll with the rich and famous.
Enjoy even more value with MTN Free After One. You only pay for the first minute of your call on MTN Free After One, and the rest is free. Plus, you enjoy free 50 megabytes worth of data to browse your favorite sites. Compare where, compare there. So dial *315# to sign up. We day for you everywhere you go. Terms and conditions apply.
Kingdom Books this year back to school promotion is in conjunction with Citidia Supermarket. Buy school items worth 100 Ghana cedis from Kingdom Books and get 12% discount voucher to purchase from Citidia and vice versa. School items include textbooks, pens, pencils, erasers, exercise books across all Kingdom Books branches in Accra, Tema, Kumasi, Takoradi, and Cape Coast. Kingdom Books, where quality and affordability is assured. For further information, call 0302 764209 or 0302 746101 and 0501 401050. Terms and conditions apply.
It's now time for the Joy News Habitat Fair 2019 main event at the Accra International Conference Center. As Ghana's one-stop shop for the building and construction industry, this year we are pushing the theme, Rethinking Building Technology in Ghana to give true meaning to affordable housing. Thinking of buying a home or remodeling your existing structure? Want to know about exciting new trends or just looking for exquisite and durable accessories to make your home unique? Then join us for the Joy News Habitat Fair 2019 in collaboration with Elegant Homes and Super Sem Cement. From insurance, finance, security, and energy, we have you covered. It's a 3-day event at the Accra International Conference Center from Friday, September 20 to Sunday, September 22, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. each day. To sponsor or exhibit, please contact 054-431-0864 or 054-690-8179. The 2019 Joy News Habitat Fair is brought to you by Elegant Homes and General Construction, where quality meets value. Super Sem Cement, build your dream, and is sponsored by Pertop, Timeless Architectural Fittings, DBS Roofing, Roofing Papa Pay Fee, Vodafone Fixed Broadband. The future is exciting. Domod Roof, distinct and dependable. Millennium Home Insurance, your trustworthy insurer, and Elbeam Realty, your home is your wealth. Join News Habitat Fair 2019, rethinking building technology to give true meaning to affordable housing.
Okay, Hey, our last caller is on the line.
Hi, Mr. Presenter. I don't understand how I take out my own money to buy credit. Then when I buy it, the people say I have to use it by a certain time. Otherwise, they will take it away. I mean, how? I should be able to keep it as long as I want. At the end, it's only expiry. It's not
All right, thank you. Now let's take a message from our sponsors.
Switch to Airtel Tigo. Get Fuse, the only call and data bundle with no expiry. So time no be problem. Call all networks and browse with Airtel Tigo Fuse. Dial star 567 hash to bundle.
Airtel Tigo. Life is simple.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evans Manson. I listen to you every day, and I encourage you and thank you for all the educative programs you mount.
And yes, you are on Joy 99.7 FM. This is Ghana Connect. Now, xenophobia has this week erupted once more in South Africa. Now, fellow Africans have died, at least 10 at the last count. There have been 3 Ghanaian injuries. This is not the first time, and many fear it may not be the last.
The attack is on foreigners. I was helpless because police phoning me, telling me to come through, come fetch your cars. They're about to be satellized.
Like that, 6 months, 3 months is gone. Again, it's broken. Government no action, so all money is gone now.
Our country has been deeply traumatized and troubled by acts of violence and criminality directed against foreign nationals and our own citizens.
We have 3 casualties. 3 people are currently injured in the xenophobic attack.
You know, when crime comes, you don't expect it and you can't plan for it. It's sporadic. It's like here in Ghana when you have a kidnapping. You don't expect it. You can't plan for it.
This morning, when I spoke to the High Commissioner, he has gone to see 2 of them. In one star, but 2 are still receiving some care.
People have lost their lives and many have been injured. Families have been traumatized. Livelihoods have been destroyed. We know that at least 10 people have been killed in this violence.
This is not true and this is the stance. So we have realized that social media has contributed a lot to sowing panic, pandemonium.
Provided some cash that if they need be for an eventual evacuation, created space for Ghanaian people to be airlifted.
So that is a story. That is a story in South Africa throughout this week. If you listen to the South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa, he posted a number of deaths at least 10. We know now, just this morning, that 3 Ghanaians have been injured. We're just getting additional details that one of them has been stabbed. 2 of them are still receiving treatment in hospital. The Ghanaian government, confirmed by the Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister, is currently making evacuation plans in case it escalates. They have provided, they say, 5 shelters across South Africa, and the shelters are currently hosting many Ghanaians who have fled. They are internally displaced in South Africa tonight. That is how serious what we are talking about is. This is not the first time, and many fear it may not be the last. But the question to ask tonight, why does it keep happening? The South African High Commissioner to Ghana has a very interesting reason why it keeps happening.
You look at the cedi is coming down. You look at the rand is coming down. It's the economy. It's the economy in the continent. It's, our economies will fluctuate, but at this point in time, petrol is rising, the food prices are rising, in South Africa. So people are feeling the pinch. So it is true that there is that stress that is caused by, and also we have high unemployment rate that is caused by poverty and also the rising cost of living.
Okay, so that is the South African High Commissioner to Ghana. When she was asked the question, why does it keep happening? She puts it down to economic reason. And so it begs the question, is what is happening in South Africa simply a symptom of a miserable continent where most of its countries have simply failed to provide acceptable living conditions for its citizens? And so, as has been argued this week by some, a lot of us in our miserable countries troop to the one small light on the midst of the, as I say, the one-eyed man is kin. And so we go there. They also feel the pressure, and so they take out their anger on us. Is that what it is fundamentally? Maybe it's Africa's problem staring us back in our faces. It's a mirror for us to analyze and go to the bottom of the real problems instead of just simply calling them names in South Africa. I know it's a hard thing to examine, but maybe that's what we need to do. She's really put it controversially, but that's something that will be engaging South Africans themselves, Ghanaians who are caught up in this, and colleagues across the continent to examine tonight. Wherever you are tonight, you can get in touch with us. This is how you can do so.
Join us now on Twitter, hashtag Ghana Connect Live, Facebook, Joy 99.7 FM, or send us a WhatsApp on 0244 340 437, and we will call you back. Join the nation's biggest conversation now and connect to authority.
One country that has felt this the most is Nigeria. And as we know, in Nigeria, MTN has shut all its offices, and the South African embassy has been shut down as well. Nigeria this week also recalled its ambassador to South Africa. So this is a full-blown diplomatic crisis playing out between Nigeria and South Africa as a result of this. Emmanuel Chibueze is a Nigerian businessman himself, is resident in Ghana, and has had cause to complain about near similar incidents happening to Nigerians in Ghana. Nobody died, by the way, in that instance, but a lot of them were attacked, shops looted as well in a particular instance in Kumasi. He joins us in the studio. Nana Kofi Akua has traveled across the continent and the world over. He's seen the plight of many Africans firsthand. I wonder what he makes of the situation in South Africa. He connects in the studio. Kweku Dankwa Ankara is a historian. There are many who believe there's a historical angle to this, that either the South Africans are failing to appreciate, or the Africans going there are also failing. We'll try and reconcile that. Namata is is a diaspora coordinator of People's Power, a political movement in Uganda. She is also head of creative arts and advocacy of Economic Fighters League. Hello, Namata.
Hi.
Thank you for connecting with us in the studio. I'm curious to hear your view on the Ugandan view on all this. Great to have you. We'll be crossing over to South Africa shortly, and I'm very excited because we'll be talking to the South African. In fact, Yusuf is a South African and is connecting with us on the line right now. That's where I want to start. I'll be going to Nigeria, Kenya, and the US also tonight on Ghana Connect. But I want to start in South Africa, the epicenter of all this. Hello, Yusuf.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for connecting. Where in South Africa are you connecting from?
I am based in the Gauteng region in Johannesburg. So that's not the capital city of South Africa, but about 35 kilometers from Pretoria.
Okay, great to have you connect with us. Also connecting is
Thank you for having me.
is a Ghanaian, Bright up here, also connecting on the phone. Hello, Bright.
Hello, good evening, and good evening to your listeners.
Bright, thank you for connecting. Bright is a lecturer and a general secretary of the Ghanaian Association there. Bright, what is the situation tonight in South Africa for you and your colleague Ghanaians?
Good evening once again. Currently, I think the government is trying to sustain the situation, but there's still fear out there about three foreigners going out for our normal duties, our normal working, because there's the fear that we might be attacked, because these taxi drivers are normally, going around stopping cars, just checking whether there's a foreigner, trying to attack us. So For now, for the past 3 days, we haven't been going to work here in the house because of the fear of the attack here.
As of tonight, has that fear subsided, or is still as grave as it was 3-4 days ago when people were being killed? Has it improved? Have you seen an improvement?
For now, we haven't seen any much improvement. There's still the fear there, and then we think the police are not doing too much. Because recently somebody was stabbed. Officially, so it's alleged to be a Ghanaian. So the fear is still there, and I think the president came out to make a comment, and we think still the situation is escalating in some other hotspot areas. So I think it's still going on. It's still going on. It's not doing enough to control the situation. Yes.
Okay, and Bright, I forgot to ask, where in South Africa are you connecting from? Which province?
I'm in Pretoria East, about 30 km from Sunnyside, where the escalation is happening. Yeah.
Okay, I want to keep safe. Stay on the line for me. Let me bring in Yusuf as a South African. Yusuf, what's your own perspective on this?
Well, firstly, I need to voice this out, that it's pretty revolting that this kind of violence is stemming from Africans to Africans. I also need to voice out that this is not South Africa's view as an entire population, but the chaos is caused by the minority. My views on xenophobia right now is that I think it is a perpetuated disease that stems from colonialism, which then turned into tribalism, and I think it's pretty much unacceptable. It's pretty rough. Things have calmed down in Johannesburg a bit. The police are trying their best to even out the playing field and protect several foreign citizens. But yet again, it needs to be a change in mentality, and I'm not necessarily saying that this is okay, because it really isn't. But things have calmed down a bit. A lot of foreign shops have opened up for business again. But things are.
Hello, Yusuf?
Yes.
Okay, we lost you briefly. Did I hear you say that for you, part of this has to do with colonialism? Did you say that?
Pardon?
I hear you say colonialism is part of this.
No. I think those are my views. But the reason why we are here right now is it started with colonialism, which then transformed into tribalism, and I feel that there's a lack of African patriotism, and this is why we find ourselves where we are right now. We cannot necessarily blame it on that, but I think that it has been a major contributing factor to where we as Africans find ourselves right now with black on black violence, and I think it's absolutely terrible. It shouldn't be something. It shouldn't even be an option. So it saddens me pretty much. And like I said before, I think this is the way we find ourselves right now in South Africa is a result of a small minority of people, and it is not a representation of who we are.
Of who you are. Yusuf, stay with me on the line. Bright Aswa, I want to come to you, Namata. What do you make of his point? This is a South African assessing the problem. He says it's colonialism that has now been metamorphosed into some form of tribalism.
Yes.
And Yusuf, stay on the line. I wanted to interact with your other colleagues in the studio here in Accra. But if you listen to South African High Commissioner there, she put that down to the economic reasons. Where do you stand on this? Why this is happening? Yusuf, just a second. I'll come back to you. Just on the line for me briefly. I'll come back to you shortly.
All right.
Okay, Namata.
I think it's a combination of two situations. I thought it was interesting that the South African High Commissioner mentions that, but she doesn't set it in its historical context. So the economical situation is not just a result of the current troubles that we are facing, not just in South Africa, not just in Ghana, but on the continent as a whole. It is also rooted in that historical context. And by that, I mean, if you look at the conversation I'm having with a lot of people right now, I'm saying to them, it's like, look, we are all very frustrated by what we are seeing. Yes, it is awful. It is terrible.
You mean the attacks?
The attacks and the xenophobic, Afrophobic attacks happening.
Why do you call it that?
Because it is being perpetrated against Africans for the most part, right? But if you look at it in sort of the historical context, if you look at the apartheid regime and how that impacted the people. I mean, they were deprived of all their rights. They were deprived of their land. They were deprived of their right to self-determination. They were unable to sort of have any sort of control on how they sort of developed as a nation, right? They were deprived of dignity. So they go through this period, and then they go into a period where they're promised so much. At the end of the apartheid regime, they are told by the ANC that they will get housing, they will get education, they will get all these different things. The ANC has not been able to deliver on that, right? And then you also have like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, during which period, you know, you have people who were perpetrators of the worst crimes during apartheid coming out and saying, well, yes, I killed your sister, or I did this to your people, I did that, and then being given amnesty. So there's been a failure to sort of exact justice in each of these situations, right? So the people did not get justice at the end of apartheid. They were not allowed to sort of go through the period of mourning. They sort of transitioned straight from apartheid to Rainbow Nation, right? So then you have that, and then you have these promises of economic justice and all that kind of thing, and then the ANC has not delivered on those things. And so they see the ANC, who are the liberators, and they can't attack them because they are the liberators, in quotation marks, right? And then at the same time, you have the situation with them looking at how they do not have any control over their own economy, for example, to start with. So you have these two situations, and then they're going to look and try and find someone that they can attack. And that's going to end up being someone that they see as below them. And who do they see as below them? They see the Africans, not knowing about, for example, the frontline states that supported them during the apartheid regime, right? Or they see women, because that's also a situation that they're talking about right now. So what you're finding is that what is happening is they're sort of externalizing or articulating that pain and that struggle that they are feeling, and it's being articulated against the Africans, it's being articulated against the women, as opposed to being sent in the direction that it actually should be going.
Should it be going as and where?
Well, they should be looking at their leadership.
The ANC, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the government.
Quickly, you are the historian here. You agree with that assessment?
Yeah, to a very large extent, except the point he makes that the South Africans see other African migrants as below them. I think it is an issue, like you rightly started, the historicity of the problem needs to be well examined, because the formation of African states, not South African alone, is a colonial legacy. And it created certain hegemonic structures where certain people benefited. And within it is also the modern nation states that emerged out of these colonial structures. And if you look at it critically, even across Africa, you realize that nothing was done to change the colonial structures. That colonial
South Africa, you mean?
Everywhere in Africa. And I will zoom into South African situation. So what happened was that after independence, the colonial structures that benefited the white elites who were then ruling benefited the emerging African elites who appropriated that right and still maintained the Africans as subjects instead of making them citizens. So equitable distribution of the resources did not occur. And this led into serious inequality and marginalization. And that is what was carried on. The South African situation is even quite different because of the apartheid. You have the Boers or the Dutch whites taking independence from the British from 1910, carried it all over up to 1994. By the time Mandela went in to have the agreement with the white Dutch people who were then ruling, the issue of the political settlement question was never ever answered, because how do you migrate from that apartheid regime to the new South African state, which is the Rainbow Nation she talked about? Now, what happened within that context was that the very few cabal of ANC leadership who were with there actually bargained to their own satisfaction. So you have something like black empowerment, which enriched the few elite members of the
neglect
ANC
of the majority.
to the neglect of the majority.
But my question is, and the things you're touching on, why do you take that then on your fellow Africans on the continent?
That is where I'm coming in. So within the modern state, like she rightly also explained, the opportunity, the colonial structures gave opportunity for the profitable modes of production went into the white people. Then the retail segment also went to the Asians, the Indians. They are into that area. So the blacks were only in the peasantry or the smallholder agriculture where they don't even own their lands and so on. So what happened was that when it comes to even the informal sector, which after the 1994, the South Africans saw as opportunity to emerge from. That is where the other Africans too have come in with their experiences, like Nigerians, like Ghanaians, who have had a huge experience from 1950s, and they have created a craft. So when they enter into that space, they are able to appropriate the space and make a meaningful living out of it than the South Africans. So it is purely a contestation of space for who is capable of taking that informal space and make a good living.
So what you're analyzing, you're saying is that the whites and the few ANC elite have taken the big white collar jobs, etc. And then the retail space too, and anything lower than that you expect that the indigenous Black South Africans will occupy. The Africans from the continent, because they've had independence for a long time, they have the wherewithal, etc., have come in and taken that space as well.
That space is,
and so that then is becoming
a contestation.
But why are they not taking
space.
it out on the white?
They cannot take it on the white because the new nation state after 1994 had given that privileges to the white. As he explained, they cannot be touched. Even the Truth and Reconciliation gave them that opportunity not to be touched. Okay, the amnesty to them. So as for them, they are well established within that space. So the place of contestation is the informal sector.
That's what the issue is.
And that is where our friends from Nigeria and Ghana who have this experience
have gone into occupy.
Yes, and you see it also in Ghana. I want to
come
add
to that. We will expand that conversation, but this is very interesting. Nana, do you agree with the historical reasons being offered to this? I mean, is that where you stand too?
Well, partly. I think if we want to look at the history, we actually have to look even beyond African history. You know, the whole thing of, for example, the ancient Greeks decided to call their pantheon god, Zeus. His name was Zeus Xenios, and the word Xenios means the hospitable one. You know, so basically, in ancient Greek religion, because Zeus was seen as the god who is hospitable to strangers, it became embedded in culture, and some people believe that the ancient Greeks were hospitable to strangers because they didn't want to offend Zeus, not because they were necessarily nice people. If you look at Christian religion, look at Judaism. For example, the Old Testament teaches that every third year, the Jews were to give a tenth, what we call the tithe today. They were to give it to a group of people. In this group, you find the word strangers. Strangers were immigrants. Throughout human history, we've migrated, and with migration has come this us versus them culture.
The tensions.
And in fact, if you look at Africa's history, I think it's easy to blame colonialism, but before colonialism, our differences stood out very strongly, and actually that was what made slavery, the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism, excel. So, for example, you'd find out that European slave traders would order the captains of slave ships that they shouldn't buy too many slaves from one port, because they will bear the cost of you traveling from the coast of South Africa through Angola, through all the way. They would rather bear that cost than you just sailing to one castle, one port, wherever, and buying too many slaves, because our differences stood out, and it's always been used against us. And I say that until as a people, as Africans, we start focusing on our similarities, we are never ever going to break free. So for example, if you stay around Uganda, Kenya, you'd hear the example of colonialism being compared to a bottle of Guinness or a glass of Guinness. It's white at the top, gets cream in the middle, and gets black at the bottom. This is how colonialism was set up. That's totally undeniable. But I'm saying that our troubles go even deeper and further than that. And I think that if we want to, it's a global trend also. So you look at the far right, Trump saying nationalism, America first. What is it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Strangers second, third. Mexicans are rapists. What does that mean? It's an attack on. Look at how did Boris Johnson become Prime Minister of England? What is the bedrock? What started Brexit?
Yeah, immigration.
We don't want strangers among us. Mm-hmm. This is a global trend. Ghana's problem with Nigerians, for example. It's complicated.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't want to immediately go to colonialism as the root.
Okay, but here's the thing. I want to come back to the South African High Commissioner's point. I've heard the colonial argument. But at the heart of that, isn't that economic, really? You can strip all the colonial, but isn't that boiled down to economic? Because a lot of the guys who've gone to South Africa, we are told, it's the rest of the continent's failing, some have argued. And it's the only reason why people are flocking to the easiest place they can find, where they seem to see grass being greener at their feet, which is South Africa. You're Nigerian.
Yes.
And you've seen a lot of your folks being attacked, not only in South Africa, by the way. In fact, almost every place in the continent where trouble happens, they say Nigerians are the reason.
Yes.
Is that fundamentally why Nigerians flee South Africa, Nigeria, for example, to seek? Because you see, grass is greener at their feet. The continent's countries and the leaders have failed their people, and so we all go to where we think will be better.
Yeah, I would not be citing just Nigeria as an example. I always see the situation we're experiencing within the continent as a general situation. We've had the Arab aspect of it, the Arab Spring, where the youths all ran amok, and then we had leadership changes here and there. What we're experiencing in South Africa is not isolated to South Africa. It is an issue of a total economic failure in leadership. We have leaderships that have failed totally in Africa in providing, in responding to the needs
of
their people. And that is exactly what is rearing its ugly head among the youths. If you go to South Africa, for instance, there are several areas which the South Africans think they also, like he has analyzed, dominate at their level.
Or they should be giving exclusivity over those areas. Like the way the Ghanaian traders say Nigerians should not get into retail.
So you find Zimbabweans, having to share shacks and places, where the little people are supposed to live. You find Zambian truck drivers taking over the driving of trucks in South Africa. You find Nigerians, taking up auto repair shops and stuff like that, and commercial shops. And so the South Africans, the government itself haven't failed. The government of South Africa has failed her people, because for 24 years, one expects that at least there should be a little empowerment of the black people.
Black South Africans.
The black South Africans. Okay. There should be a conscious social intervention that should take place, that should happen by the government on the South African youths. South ANC as a government has failed in that respect. And we have seen the replica of such failure across Africa. And I just pray that it wouldn't go into something that Africa itself will not be able to control in the next 5-10 years.
But that's an interesting point. I want to come back. I want to go back to South Africa because they live there and just run what I've heard by them. Hello, Yusuf.
Yes.
Yusuf, you heard the last point about this is also a purely economic reason. South African government have failed their own people, and it's an economic one.
Yeah, I mean, like when we look at South Africa's constitution, especially with special focus on the economic development, there's these great acts which have been implemented. Yeah, right. On paper, they are completely amazing, but the implementation of them has been, however, the greatest challenge. Like, for example, the broad-based economic Empowerment Act, which is known as Triple BEE. That is probably, I think, one of the best ways of trying to empower the black person. However, I think the implementation of it, coupled with corruption in our country, and a sense of loyalty to the current government has been our biggest threat. Now, with regards to foreign citizens and their contribution to the economic development of the country has been one of the greatest challenges, because you find foreign citizens who've got great establishments of business, but do not pay tax, right? And I think maybe that is what has perpetuated what we find ourselves in, which is I think what should be declared as a state of emergency. But now looking at it from a social context, is that there's a high level or high rise in the abuse of women and children, be it sexually or physically. And I feel that the media has perpetuated or has chosen to pay more attention to the harassment of women, which is extremely important. But they've lost the essential fact of people are dying, be it South African citizens or not. Now, bringing it back to where we find ourselves, there were there's so many points that have been raised from Nigeria, from the Commission of Ghana, but I think we are a bit tied for time. If I had to say from my perspective, and this is just largely my views and not the whole of South Africa's, I think we as the continent, we lacked a sense of patriotism, and had that been established from the get-go within South Africa, from the transition from the TRC to post-apartheid to the millennial era, I think we would not find ourselves really
where we are. Yusuf, I'm grateful that you connected with us. Bright is still with you on the line. Bright, you are Ghanaian living in South Africa. I wonder, what do you do in South Africa? Are you there for economic reasons?
Yes, I'm a teacher here. I'm teaching here in South Africa. Yeah.
Okay. And you did you leave to South Africa because you couldn't find a suitably rewarding, financially rewarding job here? I mean, what was the motive? What was the motivation fundamentally for going?
Not necessarily leaving Ghana because I wasn't getting a job or something. I just wanted to, learn more and also explain what is happening on the other continents. And I'm also schooling here, so actually that's what we were in South Africa. Yeah.
Was it a case of the grass was greener in South Africa and not so much back home?
Yeah, really, it's like that. But there's something I also want to put across.
Please do.
We have there's a former Minister of Health who comes out at a press conference to say that foreigners are taking over our hospitals, and for that matter, they should be sent home. And we have a whole mayor of Johannesburg calling people to say that foreigners are taking over the streets of Joburg, so they should be sent home. So these all comments are not unhealthy, which is also causing this escalation of xenophobic attack. So it's like the leaders are not doing that education to their people because they themselves are involved, making comments which are escalating these issues of xenophobic. Yeah.
Okay, Bright, thank you very much. Yusuf, thank you very much. Both gentlemen connected with us from South Africa. Namata, so we've heard the sides, the colonial side, we've heard the economic side. It comes back to the point whether can this ever stop? I mean, do you see any way out of this mess? But do you agree with the secessions, though, that this is a reflection of a continental failure of leadership?
I think it is, in the sense that if you think about the fact that there's just a lack of equilibrium across the continent. So you were talking about how everyone floods to one location, or I think you called it one point of light.
Yeah.
That is going to happen. We do not live in silos. We are not isolated. So what is happening in one space will impact what is happening in another, right? So if you have a situation where I don't know. Like, I mean, even if you look at the relationship between Ghana and Nigeria, people are going between the countries. You know, just the fact that even that they were, you know, they're both Anglophone, so it sort of connects them in that way. So there's going to be sort of things that draw you to other spaces for, it doesn't necessarily only have to be economic reasons, but what is happening in one space will impact what is happening in another. You saw it as well with like the Arab Spring. You see it with all sort of various actions across the continent. You know, we can't say that we exist in a bubble and what happens here only happens within that bubble. And you see that in that even when you look at South Africa before the end of apartheid, you know, Mozambique was going through its troubles, the DRC was going through its troubles. So then you had an influx of people going to South Africa, even though that was during the apartheid regime. So we can't isolate ourselves in that sense. And I think that's part of the issue. You know, we're sort of trying to sort of fix our own issues. I mean, and you see it happening here as well. You know, we have people saying, you know, we need to fix our own problems. We need to sort ourselves out. But we can't actually do that. We actually have to be able to diagnose the greater problem. When you look at it, if you look at a lot of the issues that we face here, I'm from Uganda. I keep telling people I've watched this film. Like, I mean, you see the same things happening across the board. So a lot of it is just down to exploitation. A lot of it is just, you know, an elite trying to sort of benefit to themselves and exploit, you know, a majority. The problem is capitalism. And so when you look at it in that sense, then you're able to sort of diagnose the problem beyond the symptoms. We're facing a situation where people look at it and say, oh, in Ghana we have this problem, and therefore we need to sort of isolate ourselves and fix this problem. And then in South Africa, people are saying, we've got this problem, and so we need to isolate ourselves here and fix that problem. But if we're able to look beyond that...
Can we ever do that? We're killing each other in one country. I mean, we're chasing the Nigerians out in Ghana. Can we ever come together and fix a collective problem? I mean... You make the point about we want to expand the history, but in South Africa's case, in other places you cite, rightly so, like in the USA, we've seen it happening in Europe, we've seen it with the Brexit. So the fundamentals are almost similar. But why is it that in an African case, people are actually killing their fellows? There might be something more there, just beyond the...
No, I think if you understand the history of South Africa, and I think at this point I would even jump on the colonialism wagon because of how it was implemented in South Africa. So it was set up that when... and it was the same during the during slavery in America, where basically you were supposed to develop the body of black people but not their minds. One of the best things that happened to this country, best things ever, was that our very first president placed very high value on education. When Ghana got chaotic, between 79 and 85, and there was the famine, and then there was the IMF issue, and blah, 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 and Ghana got chaotic, the political instability and all that. A lot of the investment Nkrumah had made, a lot of that resource spread out across the continent.
Yeah.
And so you'd find a lot of very well-educated Africans who would say, I had a Ghanaian teacher. Oh, my doctor, my pediatrician was a Ghanaian when I was a child. Oh, these were the Ghanaians who, some were judges in the Gambia, all over. You know, but that resource, that quality human resource, had been built by Nkrumah. You know, and I am happy that in our chaos, other parts of Africa got to benefit from that. But that's where it starts from. So once you have a system where the local people, the indigenes of South Africa, were deliberately denied access to quality education.
You think that's the case in South Africa?
No, it is the case in South Africa.
With the Bantu education.
It is the case in South Africa. I'll give you an example. So years ago when I worked in advertising, I had a colleague from South Africa come to our office in Ghana. And I mentioned Dennis Brutus. Dennis Brutus is a famous South African poet. And this guy is a bookworm. Anytime I saw Mpulelo, he was reading a book. And Mpulelo had never heard of Dennis Brutus. Why? Because the system deliberately cut them off from these authors. He didn't know his history. He didn't know all of his history. And this is an educated black South African. You can imagine the ones who didn't get access to quality education. How bad it is. So you have a situation where it is almost impossible for the regular South African indigene local to be able to take advantage of anything they've not been equipped for that. And in a situation where you don't equip the people, you don't educate them, they would go to the most primal way of rebellion, and that would be physical violence, because that they can do. They can't go to court and argue for a case. They can't take the politician on. They can't read legal documents. They don't understand. And think about it. How many black South Africans have you met anywhere in Africa?
That's an important point.
Yes. Because they were...
And you travel a lot, so you know what you're talking about.
When Namata talked about we don't live in silos. For black South Africans, unfortunately, they live in silos. You know, so when people are rebelling, demonstrating and destroying property in Nigeria, thinking it affects... Listen, the guy who is actually stabbing people and killing people, he has no idea who owns ShopRite.
Okay.
His world and the ShopRite world are millions of galaxies apart. And this is something we need to know, but we don't really know their history, and so we can't understand that. Look, listen, I can say this. I've traveled through this continent extensively. One of the places where education has been so poor, is South Africa.
But we travel. A lot of my friends travel to South Africa to go to university.
Yes, but the universities. Listen, you have to go through the basic system to get to the university. So traditionally, the universities
to that education at the end
fantastic.
Of the day.
The universities were set up for the boors, for the privileged, for the white elite.
So that's why it's that good.
Fantastic.
But when you go to you lower it to the basic,
and it's strategic. It's like gentrification. When you try to explain what gentrification is to somebody or segregation. These things are complex systems, but fundamentally, all poverty is a denial of access. If I cut your access, over time, you become deprived. It may not show, it's subtle. It becomes systemic. So it's not me saying you can't have a house here. The law says you can't have a house
I hear Nana
here.
talk and I feel this is a hopeless situation. This cycle will continue.
It can be cured.
Because if you really look at the BBC pulled up an interesting graph of the attacks in South Africa, and almost over a 10-year period, every other year, people are killed. In fact, the part where it goes up onto 100 people. And so you can see that this will happen again. It's just a matter of when.
No.
From all that I've heard.
Yeah,
it's almost like
it can be cured because, like he said, if proper education is given to the people, same situation is happening in Ghana, Nigeria, and so on. The reason why the situation is not episodic like South African one is that there is also other avenue of the deprived youth and people to also get opportunity to get what they want from the state itself. You see? So if you look at Ghana critically, you will see that the youth who suffered the brunt of the unemployment situation and so on have morphed themselves into political party systems, and they see that this is a laid down regulation, like a rules of engagement. If you want to get your bid from the state, this is the way to go.
Become a delegate.
Very good. This is the way to go, and so on and so forth. So you can't see, you sometimes see the pressure being put on the government through periodic elections. But in South African situation, because of their short nature of the freedom itself of the South Africans, they cannot attack the ANC political system, which they've seen as people who gave them freedom. So the immediate people they can charge on to ventilate their anger to the oppression they are facing is the African migrants, whom they see as people contesting them. And the South African state itself too has failed and weakened, because if you look at the state,
so you agree with you,
yes, state. If you look at state verticality, everybody look at the state to deliver the public goods equitably.
But most people argue that South Africa, I get a factual, one of the biggest economies in the continent. We all want to go to South Africa.
Notwithstanding,
I mean, people pride themselves. How many times have you been to Joburg? I've been to White. I mean, that's a contradiction in terms.
Yeah, the contradiction
they
there
is very wealthy.
Yeah.
That's why all of us want to go. I just asked. Can I just ask Brian the question?
Can I chip in?
Who are the holders of the very wealth you are talking about? The holders of the wealth is the white population, and they are. Okay, in all these situations, yes, and some of the black leaders, the elites that were in ANC. The black empowerment policy has benefited them. Now someone like the president, Ramaphosa, he had a lot of shares being appointed into the board, and he was one of the core members of the black empowerment policy of the ANC. And as a result, he appropriated so much wealth. Now he's in MTN all over. So you see that at the apogee of the political structure, the political elites are.
So the wealth that Brighton Co said they went there for the grass is greener. It is
within
there's one word for it. The word is inequality.
Inequality.
That's the word. And that's a technical word. And the reason why the word so last year I did a project on inequality in Ghana, and it's one of the most difficult things to talk about because normally you look at the extremes. That's the easiest way to measure inequality. For a country to be saved, you need a very big middle class, massive middle class, And for a long time, Ghana was like that, Obi and Nyobia. That's why you can say Obi and Nyobia because me too, I get my small to eat.
Of course.
So you can drive your big car. Me too, I have my bicycle. I don't care. Once you have a big middle, but when you have a situation where wealth sits at the 1%. So in South Africa, 85% of the nation's wealth sits with just the whites. 85%. And they are what percentage of the population? So it's there. And then you have the Ramaphosa and Co, who are right there. And I mean, think about it. You're entering Cape Town, and the first thing you see are the Zingli houses. The sheets, aluminium sheets. That's the first thing you see. And so the townships. I have never seen South Africa as beautiful because. Once
many disagree with you.
No, because
the places you go.
Because I'm conscientized.
Okay.
So when I'm entering Cape Town, and the first thing I see are the shanties.
Yeah.
Nothing else impresses me.
I want to hold on. I want to connect to Peter, who is joining us in Kenya. Hello, Peter.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for connecting. Also joining me is Mohammed. Is in Nigeria. He's a journalist. Hello, Mohammed.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. Let me start with you, Mohammed. In Nigeria, what's the situation tonight? I know a lot of South African businesses were attacked. The Nigerians withdrew their, recalled the ambassador. The South Africans, retaliated with withdrawing their own because of fears of attack. What's the situation now tonight?
Yes, well, thank you for having me. The situation is much calmer and. Just this evening, the Nigerian government, through the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Enyama, stated the fact that Nigeria cannot cut ties with South Africa because there are more than 800,000, if you hear me clearly, 800,000 Nigerians legally residing and working in South Africa.
800,000 Nigerians in South Africa. This is what official figures from the South African High...
from the Nigerian High Commission.
Nigerian High Commission, okay, in South Africa, okay.
Yeah, so if you cut ties with them, it will definitely affect the Nigerians living and working there as well. So Nigeria is not cutting ties with South Africa. That is a diplomatic side South Africa. That is the situation on ground. But be as it may, like you mentioned, the Nigerian government has actually called its High Commissioner. But the special envoy of the Nigerian government, led by the Director General of Nigerian Intelligence Agency, arrived South Africa yesterday, and they are scheduled to have meeting with President Ramaphosa and his cabinet members. And the Nigerian High Commissioner is expected to come back with that special envoy whenever they arrive in Nigeria, I think tomorrow or the day after. But again, another situation is the fact that most of the South African businesses are quite open here for business because government have been able to put securities in place to protect their businesses. Like DSTV, ShopRite are quite open. They are open now. MTN is open now. Stanbic IBTC banks, they are open now. And lastly, I'm sure probably you must have heard the fact that Air Peace is a Nigerian airline. I'm sure it's like the flight to Ghana as well too. They've offered to evacuate Nigerians in South Africa, but they are supposed to start today. But the report we are getting this evening, which is official, is the fact that those Nigerians that were scheduled to fly the free flight back to Nigeria, actually most of them are not documented. They don't have valid documents. Probably their passport is expired, or some of them cannot even find their passport. So the free evacuation of Nigerians, those people that are willing to come back home, is actually postponed to either Monday or Tuesday next week to allow the Nigerian High Commission in South Africa provide the necessary documents for these people whose documents are either incomplete or expired to be able to make the trip back home.
Well, Mohammed,
So
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you very much for the Nigerian update there. Let me go to Kenya now. Peter, what's the Kenyan perspective on this?
Well, the government has put out a statement essentially condemning what is going on in South Africa. The fact of the matter being that there's quite a large number of Kenyans there. The real figures are not yet really out. But the challenge mostly remains undocumented. That essentially is the crux of the matter. The fact that there tends to be quite a lot of people who've either gone there overland without a proper documentation, have no legal status, have no passports, that sort of thing, and essentially mostly doing lower-end jobs. And that's being the source of the problem. And while condemning the violence that is going on and calling on the South African government to essentially put its house in order and protect people and their property, they're also saying that there needs to be something done at maybe the Africa Union level about undocumented immigrants who tend to be a problem all across Africa.
Peter, thank you for connecting Mohammed as well. It appears this is a really continental problem. So how do we fix it? Your suggestion, Chibueze, what would you suggest? And very briefly, what would you suggest is the way out of this mess?
I didn't have my second round.
No, go.
You see,
very briefly,
the issue really for me is that Africa will have to come together and re-strategize its leadership. If we continue with the current crop of leaders we have, we are doomed. Why? Because the last time I was there, I told you that we have not been able to manage 15 countries in ECOWAS, and we have signed African Free Trade Agreement, which brings together 54 countries. A friend of mine who attended a conference here, she's a British, he said British is pulling out of Europe simply because the EU is run like a cult, and there are countries, who have taken it to themselves to manage, and so Europe cannot find its freedom in EU, so it's coming out. Now, if what happens in Europe begins to happen even in an unorganized ECOWAS, very unorganized, we could not achieve
single digit.
We cannot achieve common currency among 5 countries in the last 23 years. We have set up ECOWAS protocols in the last 35 years. We cannot get even small protocols interpreted to the ordinary man on the street. The driver who plies Lagos Abidjan corridor doesn't know what is in for him in whatever they call protocol. We cannot go anywhere. Leadership is the key, and it starts with the African youth, not through violence, but through looking at best practices everywhere and try to replicate them here.
Namata, what do you say?
I
Is the
think
solution for this?
The solution for this
is as radical as that? Clear the current crop of leaders?
That needs to happen. We have to acknowledge that. I mean, I come from a country that's been under one dictator for 33 years. So, I mean...
you know what you're talking about.
So I know what I'm talking about in that sense. I agree with that. I also think on the immediate front, one thing that we need to do, simply because we need to find a way of uniting the continent, is actually in this very immediate present, is sever diplomatic and economic ties with South Africa. And the reason I say that is because, as you mentioned earlier on, when you hit the businesses, you're not hitting, the situation. You're not dealing with it. You're sort of, it's a reactionary thing. And yes, there are ways in which it can be helpful. But if you start actually hitting the nation's leadership and forcing them into a corner where they, the political and the economic elite, are forced to face the fact they are not able to trade, they are not able to engage unless they address the matter, in the way that Tanzania, for example, is not flying to South Africa, people are boycotting the World Economic Forum. We need to be doing those things. We need to sever that connection as a temporary measure in order to sort of force them to start addressing it. So they stop calling it criminality and, what is it? Criminal elements. They need to address it and call it what it is.
Okay.
Yes.
You agree?
I disagree because
your solution is
isolation did not help South Africa during the apartheid regime.
Okay.
Finally,
Now,
it was
what
dialogue
your
that
solution
finally
is?
won the way.
Your
So
solution
what
is?
I'm saying is that the South African leadership itself must find solution to
What
their-
solution would you prescribe?
They must come out with their own internal solution and also educate the people, even in terms of the Afrophobia aspects. What I want them to do is to sensitize their people about even the contribution, the very freedom they are enjoying
So
today.
you're going towards a way of educate them.
Educating
Let know what
them
the
and
rest
so
of
on
them
and
for
so
them.
on. Yeah.
I think I'll disagree with him that isolation didn't hurt South Africa. It did. And one of the best cases for it was a poem Dennis Brutus wrote, where he said, "I've lashed them the marks of my scars, lie deep in their psyche, blah, blah, blah." But he basically was talking about, I think it was about rugby, and he wrote in 1960-something, South Africa was denied, and it really hit them really hard. So isolation actually is impactful.
But finally, it was dialogue that brought to the whole thing.
Gentlemen, thank you. We hope that this ends sometime. Thank you, Amata. Nana, always lovely to have you. Chibweze.
Pleasure.
I go to South Africa to do business soon. Kuku, thank you very much for connecting. And all those who connected from Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. Grateful. Up next is the first take, and it's a review of the Congress, 8 key changes. And you want to stay here for the latest on where Ghana football is going next. My name is Evans Spencer. Enjoy the weekend.